Today I'm going to share the mother of all tips on how to understand and love friends and family who think differently from you politically. And if you've been struggling with this in your relationships and you're fed up with the polarization and the fighting, you may have even given up talking, this could be a key insight that really changes things for you. And if you've watched other videos, you will see that I have talked about some of the research in that. I'm going to mention this again very quickly about the difference between conservative and liberal views. And I want to start here, but I am going to add a new idea here that I think is really powerful. And so before I mentioned research again, Rob Willer did a TED Talk on this. And then also there's a man named Barry Johnson who wrote a book called And on Polarity Management. And I kind of combined these two together. So I want to show you that in general, conservatives tend to value, can you see that? Loyalty, respect for authority, and moral purity. And then Barry Johnson talks about, in terms of government and how it's structured, this tends to mean that they prefer decentralization. So this is things like allowing states to make their decisions and so forth, so that there's more freedom about what people can do. Now, liberal values tend to be equity and fairness, care and protection, and they tend to prefer centralization as an answer because of that. If you think of it with equity and fairness, things like, well, let's make a national mask mandate so that we can protect more people. Whereas with conservatives, they're looking at wanting to maintain this decentralization and have more freedom, because for them, they're very loyal. They have a tremendous respect for authority. And anytime there's a new rule or a new something else to follow, they take that very seriously. And so they want to be very thoughtful about what gets added. Now, the piece that I want to add today that's different from the other videos is looking at the fears underneath this. And so if we go back to conservatives again, and you see that these are the things they value: loyalty, respect for authority, moral purity, etc. The fears then underneath this are socialism, moral decline, and a fundamental loss of freedom. And these are generalities. Of course, this is not every single person who identifies as conservative, but these generalities are really helpful to understand why we're so polarized and why we see the world differently. So underneath it, again, this is what they are really afraid of when they are looking at how we should organize or how we should address the different difficulties that come up in our world. Now, for liberals, because of their values with equity and fairness, care and protection, so forth, they're afraid of needless death and suffering and loss of life. You know, if we don't take care of people and everyone doesn't have fair, equal access to health care, for example, that there could be needless death and suffering. And so that's why they tend to prefer a more centralized approach so we can take care of more people. Now, what happens? Okay, so here, if you were to look at these two things, fundamentally, you might say to yourself, oh my gosh, these are in conflict with each other, right? And which one is right? That's how we tend to approach this. And this is what Barry and other people in polarity management describe as or thinking. It's this belief that we have to pick one, that one is right and one is wrong. And as I mentioned in earlier videos, anytime we're afraid, we are using our what I call reptile brain to think. It's a part of our brain that sits at the base of the head. And this brain, when this brain's active, we tend to blame, we don't listen well, we want to fight, and we want to attack. And so if you are thinking that the other side has all these bad things, like, oh my gosh, you know what? If the liberals get their way, we are going to have loss of life. If liberals get their way, the conservatives are afraid they're going to have a loss of freedom. We're going to end up with socialism, moral decline. And then the liberals are afraid, oh my gosh, if the conservatives get their way, we're going to have a loss of life. All these people are going to die, right? And, you know, yes, there are certain consequences and things that will happen as we balance these two out. But what happens is when the reptile brain is active and it's focused on these red, It catastrophizes. Oh my gosh, everybody's going to die. We're going to have massive sickness and destruction. Or if, in the conservative side, we're going to end up with all this loss of freedom. We're going to end up socialists. Well, here's the reality of this. Neither side wants any of this, okay? And both sides think these are good things. You're not going to talk, a conservative's not going to sit there and say, oh, I don't want to care. I don't care about anybody. I don't want to protect anybody. And the liberals they don't want socialism, right? So we actually want the same things underneath. The issue is we're divided on exactly where the line is between the two. So I want to mention 3 points here that I hope are going to really help you think about this and reframe it in a way that's going to allow you to talk to people on the other side, or at least accept them on a whole different level, reduce your stress around it. Number 1, we all want the same things, and we all fear the same things, okay? Maybe to different degrees, but fundamentally, we want the same things. The second point is that this discussion about which one of these is right or wrong is central to our democracy. Think about this. Centralization versus decentralization. This is the whole point of democracy. Where's the line? Where's the line between taking care of everybody in the way that the liberal viewpoint wants and becoming too big of a government that concerns the conservatives, right? We're constantly navigating that line and trying to find where it is. That's fundamental. We need both of these sides. It's not a question of who's right. It's not an or question, as Barry suggests. It's an and question. How do we create the right amount of loyalty and moral purity while we also take care of people and have equity and fairness? Where is the moral line? That's the big debate with pro-life and pro-choice. Now, it's a moral debate for conservatives, and it can be more of a freedom debate for liberals. But the idea is we need to debate that line. The world is always changing. Who we are today was much different than who we were 200 years ago. What we thought was okay back then, we wouldn't even dream of today. So we always have to renegotiate these lines. This is fundamental to democracy. Where we get in trouble is when we think the other side's the enemy. We don't recognize there's a push-pull here. We need that other side. It's really important for our freedom, for our democracy to function effectively. Whoops, sorry about that. All right. And so let me just finish up here by saying that then the third thing is just around this reptile. The reptile focuses on the fears. And I've talked about in other videos, our brain, unfortunately, is not wired to handle today's world. It's designed to handle a world where we had to fight and kill each other to survive. It doesn't work very well right now. I have other videos where I explain how you can live from what I call the cortex brain, which is the brain that is our thinking brain, and stay out of your reptile brain for situations like this so that you can handle your family more effectively. I've got a number of videos on tips for how to do that. But here I just wanted to share this fundamental idea so you at least can see there is value in the other side and not to just hate them outright so much. So that's what I have for you today. I'm Jackie Kelm with Appreciative Living. And again, you can check out more videos on my channel, which is Appreciative Living with Jackie Kelm. And also visit our website at www.appreciativeliving.com. Thank you for joining me, and here's to your joy.